Hello again. In my previous video we looked at how to install the Rust programming language on Windows. What we currently lack is a functional source code editor to give us things like code completion, syntax checking and debugging. We have a number of choices. If you've programmed in Rust on Linux, you might be aware of IntelliJ IDEA, and this is also available for Windows. You could also use Microsoft's Visual Studio, either in its free Community Edition or one of the paid-for offerings. My preference, however, is to use Visual Studio Code, or VS Code as it's commonly known. At the moment, this seems to have the best combination of features, usability and community support. So in this video, I'll show you how to set up VS Code for general use and how to customize it for Rust code development. First, let's check we're up to date with the version of the Rust programming language that's installed. To do this, run rustup update. That's fine, we've got the latest version. Let's quickly demonstrate how we can create and compile packages containing Rust source code. We're going to cd into our projects folder, create a new package called Hello World with cargo, cd into our package folder, and run the source code with cargo. Let's take a look at that Rust source code again by opening it in Notepad. Now, real programmers don't edit their source code in Notepad, so now we'll take a look at VS Code to do some proper grown-up coding. To download VS Code, open a browser and go to code.visualstudio.com. Click on the download button on the home page and select the 64-bit system installer for Windows. Open the installer and answer the questions. From the additional tasks, I can see merit in some of these, so I'll enable those options. Review the options, click install, and that should just take a few seconds. Once the installation is complete, we can launch Visual Studio Code. Which looks like this. If we just take a few seconds to pin the VS Code task to the taskbar, then we can take a look around. Click the Open Folder link. We can open the Hello World package that we created with cargo earlier on. Now you'll see this warning come up in the bottom right hand corner. It's recognised that there's a Git repository in the project that we've just tried to open. We'll talk a lot more about installing Git in a subsequent video, but for now let's tell VS Code not to prompt again. Let's take a look at my Rust code in VS Code. Click on the main.rs file and it opens it in an editor in VS Code. Straight away you can see that the user experience is improved. The text is color-coded according to the different structures in the code. Now we're going to add a new line to the program. As you can see, every time I type a bracket or a quote, it types a matching one and life has suddenly got much easier. If we remove the semicolon from the end of the first line, we can see that there's still some things in VS Code that would improve it. If I try and compile this code using cargo, it will complain because it contains a syntax error because of the missing semicolon. It would be nice if VS Code could indicate that, but in order to do that it needs to understand the Rust syntax, and that's where the Rust language server comes in. RLS comes with Rust and can be used by VS Code extensions to give VS Code that deep understanding of Rust. So how do we add it? Click on the Extensions button on the left and type Rust in the search bar. Here is the Rust RLS extension, and notice it is recommended based on the files I've been working on. Click the Install button and you'll see a prompt, RLS not installed, installed. Click Yes. You can watch the progress of the install in the terminal window. When it's finished, you'll see this message displayed. We can get rid of that now. We notice that the initials RLS are displayed. If we go back to the Explorer view, some things have changed. We can see, for example, that the main.rs file in our Hello World project is indicated in red because there's one problem in this file. That's the same indication here. If we click on the Open Editors, notice the red wavy underline where it's expecting a dot, semicolon, query, close bracket or an operator due to the absence of the semicolon that we removed. Put the semicolon back in. And these turn from red back to white. So we have the understanding now of the Rust syntax in the VS Code application. So now if we save our files, close down our editors, we can take a look at the cargo.toml file. Now again, we have a problem here. Our text, we just see plain text. But we do have a recommendation that the marketplace has extensions that can help with TOML files. So click Search Marketplace and we'll install the Better TOML extension. Which is now installed. We return to Explorer, reopen cargo.toml, and that looks much better. Now let's close down our terminal, close down the cargo.toml file, and return to our source code. So what else is missing? We've made changes to this code, but we haven't yet tested them using the Rust compiler. To do that at the moment, we'd need to open a new terminal window and test the changes using cargo run to know that they'd had the desired effect. But it's a bit of a nuisance having to keep switching to the terminal to test the effects of changes. To be a useful code editor, we need a proper debugging tool to enable us to test the code, set breakpoints in the code, and examine the values currently bound to Rust variables. There's a VS Code extension that gives us that capability, and it's called CodeLLDB. If we search for it, and read the README, we can see it has Rust language support. The first thing to know about CodeLLDB is that it requires Python. Some of you may already have that installed, but if not, we need to go back to our browser and visit www.python.org. From the home page, hover over the Downloads link, ignore this button here, which will only download the 32-bit version, and click on the Windows menu option. Select the latest version, scroll down to the bottom of the page and choose the Windows x86-64 executable installer. We'll run the 64-bit version of the installer, and we can just choose the standard installation. Okay, when the setup's complete, click the close button, and now we can install CodeLLDB. And the installation is now complete. Okay, so with the CodeLLDB extension installed, let's close the README down and return to our project. Now when we click on the Start Debugging option, it asks us to select an environment. Go ahead and choose LLDB. Oh dear, that's not good. Well, actually it's not as bad as the grim warning suggests, as the first time you run it for a given project, it will detect the cargo.toml file and create the launch settings it needs. The file launch.json is created. We don't need to worry too much about the contents, so just close the file. Let's make some quick changes to the source code to show what CodeLLDB can do. We're going to set a breakpoint here by clicking next to the line of code. If we then start debugging it, see on the left hand side we have a list of variables, one of which is answer, and the value of 42 is bound to that variable. If we step through the code, look at the terminal window, we see the answer is 42 displayed, which is what we wanted. We can even debug the code with no breakpoints enabled. Like so. So, let's recap on what we've accomplished during this video. We've installed the VS Code environment to provide us with a feature-rich editor for our Rust code. We've added a number of extensions to VS Code. First, we added Rust support, which uses the RLS that comes with Rust. Then we added support for TOML files. Finally, we added a debugger for the Rust code. In the next video, we'll go on to discuss Git and how to make it work well on Windows.